creatively awarded campaigns are, in round terms, about 10 times as efficient as non-creative ones, which is an astonishing difference. And we know from other studies that that correlates very strongly with effectiveness.
We've worked with Audi since 1982. In fact, it was the very first piece of business we won. And we were doing about 3 ads. We sort of said, well, how are we going to tie them together? What binds them together? And when I was going around the factory, I saw this line on a wall, and I said, oh, what's that? And they said, oh, that was an old advertising line we used to have many, many years ago, but we don't use that anymore. Okay, like that. So I'm back in London, we're having this conversation, how do you bind it together? And I suddenly go, why don't we just have
Vorsprung durch technique, as they say in Germany.
And this really just captured it brilliantly. The other thing that's fantastic about it is that we researched it, and the research came back and said, whatever you do, don't use it. Fortunately for us, we had a wonderful client in Brian Boulder, and also a lovely guy called Johnny Mazzaras, and they went, forget the research, we're going to do it. And out of that came probably one of the most famous car lines, Vorsprung durch technique. But, you know, research said no.
Away from the lover's leap.
Frankly, the brief was fantastic. It just said this brand should be loved and isn't. Its communications should feel like a simple moment of joy, just like the bar itself. And I remember Juan Cabral, who wrote and directed Gorilla, stopped them at that point and said, don't say anything else. If your brief is to make some content that is a little moment of joy in people's lives, like your chocolate bar is, I can do that.
And I remember sitting there, turning to Lee Ralston, who was working with me on the brand, and just looking at each other with this big smile on our face, like 2 kids going, that's amazing, isn't it? And I think really from that moment on, we just had a real belief and conviction that it would have been criminal if the UK public hadn't seen that, because we just thought it would be an amazing film.
Gorilla went into 4 rounds of pre-testing, so it wasn't done on a whim. And the question that the client asked at every term was, do people like it and do they know it's from Cadbury?
Millwall Brand actually said they needed to reset the scale on the interest trace. So that really confirmed that this would be incredibly engaging.
For Glass and a Half Full Productions, every £1 spent on advertising pays back £4.19 in revenue.
There you go, lad.
The launch objectives were really simple. It was about catapulting Hovis back into the hearts and minds of the British population.
And the challenge to MCBD was to produce absolutely the best work that they could possibly make.
They came to see us with this huge belief in this brand. I mean, genuinely, it was palpable when they came to see us, and their ambition for the brand. And immediately then, you sort of sensed that it would be riskier to not do this.
So if you think what Hovis actually achieved, this is a brand in a category beset with price promotion, hemorrhaging profitability all over the place. And yet this campaign achieved around about a 500% return on marketing investment. Now this is creativity and the power of creativity laid bare for all to see.
I think I should really stress that there was a real sense of team in this, and that sounds, I'm cringing inside saying that. We weren't all sat around on beanbags and stuff, there was some rows and there was some friction, and what was very, very clear was everyone really, really cared.
I think this campaign showed genuine bravery from the clients particularly. FMCG brands so often work around the incremental margins that they have at their disposal, and Hovis were in a really, really tight spot that wasn't going to do the job. I'm delighted that they had the guts to really go for it and maximise the impact, and they really got the results they deserved. It truly was the Renaissance campaign that they were looking for.
It's about not cutting corners, and everyone who contributes to that, I think, will have that work, that they'll be proud of that work forever.
Is that you home, love? Yeah.
I remember sitting in a room with Adam and Eve about February, March time, thinking, right, where do we go next? And we had quite a tough time getting there. We went through quite a few ideas, and then eventually we landed on this idea, which became The Long Wait.
The Long Wait was one of those scripts that the second we saw it, we thought there's something in this. Occasionally kids do surprise you by doing something enormously thoughtful. When they do, that is overwhelmingly appealing. That parental pride in that is huge. The Long Wait taps into that. And the other thing about it is it's just entirely simple. The creative Ben went and filmed it and edited it, and Ben came back and pressed play, and we sat and watched The Long Wait entirely as you saw it on the telly. There was no fundamental changes at all.
They've put their money where their mouth is, their neck's on the lines, and we've worked very closely with them to make sure that they weren't let down.
There is a team that have kind of been together over this period. You know, there's been some changes in personnel, but overall there's been one team, and I think that has been part of the specialness that we've created, primarily because it's allowed us to have the type of relationships which allow us to be incredibly blunt with each other. So we do have lots of argy-bargy, and it does get quite tense, and we've definitely had our moments, but by doing that, it allows us to get to the best possible work.
Having a brief from Virgin Atlantic to really communicate the essence of their brand in a compelling, original, distinctive way is a dream brief.
We briefed the agency and we were expecting them to respond in a couple of weeks, and they presented the idea of Still Red Hot as a campaign platform, and I thought, well, that sounds really good. It sort of sums up that Virginness that we were looking for. And he read the script through, and I just immediately knew, the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I just thought, that's it, it's perfect. And we didn't change a word from the original script to the film we shot.
I mean, I think Virgin has always been quite a brave client and has always believed in the power of advertising.
We went straight to the chief exec and he fell in love with it immediately too, and I think his words were, "Great, now you've given me the problem of having to fund it."
When you can get enormous emotional resonance out of a good piece of TV, then you can sway a nation with you. A great creative ad works. We're all human beings, and if we sit down and enjoy a piece of advertising, we believe the brand and actually what the brand's telling us.
It turns out, in fact, that if you've got creativity on your side, you can be more confident about the results than if you don't. So paradoxically, it turns out to be safer than being non-creative.
Business is in a sense a creative art, but we live in a world, we live in a time, we live in a period when people want to measure everything. It's click through, and I can measure how many people have done this, and somehow measuring is the most important thing. But actually creativity is the most important thing that we possess, because ultimately that's what we are. We are creative beings.